The fluorescent lights of Sterling Corp hummed with the same dull, uninspired buzz they had for the last 15 years of my life. They were the soundtrack to my existence, a low-grade tinnitus of quiet desperation and unacknowledged labor. My name is Amelia Vance, and for a solid decade, I've been the ghost in the machine, the phantom limb of this entire operation. I'm the one who ensures the servers don't spontaneously combust, the one who can navigate the labyrinthine vendor contracts blindfolded, the one who knows precisely which obscure software license keeps the entire damn ship from sinking. In short, I'm the glue. The very sticky industrial-strength glue that holds this entire overpriced, overhyped edifice together. And apparently, I'm also someone whose name is as interchangeable as a cheap ballpoint pen. This morning, the glue felt particularly strained. It was 8:52 a.m., precisely 8 minutes before my official start time. I was already brewing the lukewarm sludge they called coffee in the break room, a ritual I performed daily, not for myself. I brought my own artisanal French press, but for the executives who'd stumble in later, bleary-eyed and demanding caffeine like it was a birthright. I'd already scanned the overnight server reports, flagged a minor glitch in the international shipping logistics that, if left unchecked, could cause a 2-day delay for a major client's Q4 shipment. Standard procedure, a quick ping to the relevant department, a reassuring note in their shared project management portal, and another potential fire extinguished before it even sparked. As I poured myself a cup of my own superior brew, the automatic doors swished open, admitting the usual morning rush of crisp shirts and forced smiles. And then there he was, Mr. Sterling himself. Or, as I'd come to know him, the embodiment of everything wrong with modern corporate leadership. Nathan Altman. A man whose ego was larger than the company's market cap, whose buzzword vocabulary could fill a thesaurus, and whose ability to remember names was, shall we say, demonstrably lacking. He strode into the break room, a whirlwind of expensive cologne and thinly veiled impatience. His eyes, the color of diluted seawater, scanned the room with the practiced disinterest of someone who sees employees not as people, but as interchangeable cogs. He grabbed a communal mug, a chipped relic with the Sterling Corp logo faded to near invisibility, and gestured vaguely towards the coffee machine. "Morning, team," he boomed, his voice carrying with an unnerving resonance. "Anything critical on the horizon?" A few mumbled greetings, a perfunctory nod from the finance manager who was already checking his stock ticker. Then his gaze landed on me, standing by my French press, a picture of quiet competence and, frankly, a deeply ingrained sense of professional duty. "Ah, you there," he said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger in my general direction. "You with the excellent coffee." I took a slow sip, the rich dark roast a stark contrast to the watery disappointment lurking in the pot. "Good morning, Mr. Altman," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, my body language open but not inviting. He squinted, a flicker of confusion dancing in his eyes. "Right, yes. What's your name again?" This was it, the 10th time. The 10th time in the past 6 months that Nathan Altman, the CEO of a company I'd dedicated over a decade to, had forgotten my name. The first time, I'd brushed it off. Everyone makes mistakes. The second, I'd gently corrected him. The third, I'd introduced myself before every meeting. By the fifth, it felt less like an oversight and more like a deliberate act of erasure. But the 10th? The 10th time he asked for my name, right after I'd spent the entire weekend wrestling with a critical server migration that kept us operational through a city-wide network outage, well, that was a new low. It was like being a phantom limb, present and vital, but entirely unrecognized. "Amelia Vance," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the slow burn of indignation igniting in my chest. "I manage IT infrastructure and vendor relations." He nodded, a superficial understanding dawning on his face, as if I'd just revealed a profound scientific breakthrough. "Ah, Amelia, right, good. So, critical things? Anything I should be aware of before I head to the airport? Big day, flight to Tokyo, important investor meetings. Need to make a stellar impression." He said it with a flourish, like he was bestowing a great honor by deigning to share his travel plans with me, the coffee-fetching, name-forgetting drone, Tokyo. Of course, he was always jetting off somewhere exotic, schmoozing with investors, building his personal brand at the company's expense. Meanwhile, I was the one who made sure his emails reached him on that private jet, that his presentations were flawless, that the entire machine hummed along so he could be the charismatic conductor. "Actually, Mr. Altman," I began, my mind already whirring, a familiar spark igniting within me, "there is one minor detail you might want to confirm before you depart." He waved a dismissive hand. "Spit it out, Amelia. Time is of the essence." "Daylight saving time," I said, injecting a casual tone into my voice, as if it were an afterthought, a trivial tidbit. "It just shifted over the weekend, didn't it?" He frowned, his perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrowing in genuine confusion. "Daylight saving? What about it? The clocks change in the spring, don't they?" "Yes, Mr. Altman," I confirmed, my gaze meeting his, a subtle challenge in my eyes. "But it changes back in the fall, today actually, for most of the US, at least." His eyes darted to his expensive smartwatch, then back to me, a dawning horror creeping into his expression. "Wait, you mean it changed today?" "That's correct," I said, my voice a calm, even keel amidst his rising panic. "So, if you're flying to Tokyo, which is 15 hours ahead of Pacific Standard Time, and you assume your flight departs at, say, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, that would actually be 3:00 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, wouldn't it? A full hour difference." He started fumbling for his phone, his usual suave demeanor crumbling like a stale croissant. No, that can't be right. My assistant booked everything. She's impeccable. She'd never." "She likely didn't account for the time shift, Mr. Altman," I interjected smoothly. "It's a common oversight, easy to miss if you're not meticulously tracking operational calendars, especially when you're focused on broader strategic initiatives. The implied jab hung in the air, unspoken but potent. He was already frantically tapping away at his phone, his face paling with every passing second. "My flight? It's in 2 hours. 2 actual hours. If I don't get to the airport now..." He scrambled for his briefcase, knocking over a stack of paper cups in his haste. "Amelia, you're a lifesaver. Seriously." I owe you one. Big time. He was out the door before I could even register the full impact of his blustering exit. The break room fell silent again, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant clatter of keyboards. I picked up one of the fallen cups, a faint smile playing on my lips. 10 times. 10 times he'd forgotten my name. 10 times he'd treated me like a piece of furniture, a nameless face in the corporate wallpaper. He saw me as a function, not a person. He saw me as someone who made coffee and smoothed over his blunders. He saw me as Amelia, the anonymous IT girl. But he didn't see the meticulous spreadsheets I maintained, the cross-referenced calendars, the contingency plans for every conceivable operational hiccup. He didn't see the years I'd spent learning the intricate workings of this company, not just the technology, but the people, their habits, their blind spots. And he certainly didn't see the deep well of patience I possessed, a well that had finally, irrevocably, run dry. He thought he was flying to Tokyo for crucial investor meetings. He thought he was conducting his symphony of corporate success. But he was about to discover that the orchestra was about to strike a very different and much more discordant note. And it all started with a simple, professionally executed omission. A forgotten reminder. A perfectly timed bout of amnesia. My amnesia. The glue, as it turns out, could also be a formidable weapon. The game was on, and Nathan Altman had just made the first fatal and entirely predictable move. My exit from the break room was not one of quiet resignation, but of quiet anticipation. The real work was about to begin. The sudden departure of Nathan Altman, a whirlwind of panicked apologies and forgotten briefcases, left a curious silence in the Sterling Corp break room. I savoured the last vestiges of my artisanal coffee, the rich bitterness, a pleasant counterpoint to the growing satisfaction in my chest. He thought he was flying to Tokyo. He was, in fact, already an hour behind schedule, and his carefully constructed image was about to take a significant hit. But that was just the opening salvo. The real game, the one that would unfold over the coming days, required a more strategic approach. For years, I'd been meticulously cataloguing everything, not just server logs and vendor contracts, but the subtle shifts in corporate culture, the unspoken power plays, the individual habits and blind spots of the executives. My personal cloud storage was a digital fortress, a meticulously organized archive of Sterling Corp's operational history. It contained every email chain, every critical system update, every financial report, every whispered concern from a nervous junior analyst that had been summarily dismissed by those in power. It was a testament to my dedication, yes, but also a meticulously crafted insurance policy. The core of my counterplay lay in two areas: operational vulnerabilities and contractual obligations. Nathan's arrogance had blinded him to the fact that the company's very infrastructure, the systems I'd painstakingly built and maintained, were riddled with potential points of failure, many of which were tied to my intimate knowledge and control. Furthermore, the sheer volume of overlooked contractual details, the clauses I'd insisted on during negotiations that were now buried under years of executive complacency, provided the leverage I needed. The first domino fell the following Monday. I'd taken a personal day, a strategic absence that would cause the least immediate disruption to client-facing operations while maximizing internal impact. It was 9:17 a.m. when my personal phone, the one never linked to Sterling Corp's network, buzzed. It was an internal alert, not from my administrator console, but from a third-party monitoring service I'd subscribed to out of professional curiosity and a touch of foresight. The notification was stark. Critical system failure. Sterling Corp, CRM, Client Relationship Management System, offline. All access denied. Within minutes, my phone was a digital firestorm. Texts from former colleagues, a mix of genuine concern and professional anxiety, began flooding in. Amelia, everything okay? The CRM is down. Total chaos here. Mark sales support. Bless his frantic heart. Urgent. No client access. No new leads. No order processing. What's happening? Are you working on it? Sarah, operations manager, her usual calm demeanor replaced by a digital panic attack. Then came the corporate-wide emails. First, a vaguely worded announcement about unforeseen technical difficulties, quickly followed by a more panicked plea for IT assistance, attributing the issue to an external security breach. The IT department, bless their well-meaning souls, was scrambling, but they lacked the deep architectural understanding, the intimate knowledge of legacy systems that I possessed. They were trying to patch a dam with duct tape, while I, the architect of the dam, had simply unplugged the main water valve. I watched it all unfold from the comfort of my home office, sipping tea. I wasn't actively doing anything malicious. I was simply letting the systems I had designed to function with my input perform as designed when that input was absent. A specific sequence of automated security protocols designed to prevent unauthorized access after a prolonged period of unaddressed system anomalies had been triggered. It was a fail-safe I'd implemented years ago, and no one had ever bothered to disable or even acknowledge it. The rising panic was palpable. The CRM was the heart of Sterling Corp's sales and client management. Without it, deals stalled, customer inquiries went unanswered, and the entire revenue stream threatened to dry up. I imagine Nathan, likely still jet-lagged and reeling from his missed flight, receiving increasingly frantic calls from his board and his anxious executives. His precious Tokyo meetings would be overshadowed by the unfolding disaster back home. The third domino fell subtly, almost imperceptibly to those not paying close attention. It was a notification from the Sterling Corp legal department's internal portal, a system I still had residual access to due to a lingering vendor management role. A senior associate, clearly out of her depth, had initiated an urgent inquiry regarding a series of overdue payments to a critical software vendor. This vendor, a company whose proprietary analytics software was deeply integrated into Sterling Corp's financial forecasting, had sent multiple reminders about late payments. My own carefully filed records showed that these invoices, routed through my old approval chain, had been meticulously processed before my departure. However, as the CRM faltered, so did the automated invoice reconciliation process. Without the CRM verifying the completed payments and flagging them for the finance department's final sign-off, the system was stuck in limbo. The senior associate's query was essentially a cry for help. She couldn't confirm the payment status and, crucially, she couldn't access the vendor contract itself without the CRM's document management module, which was also inaccessible. This meant Sterling Corp was now at risk of losing access to a vital financial tool, a direct consequence of the system-wide failure I had indirectly orchestrated. I decided it was time for the trap to be sprung. Not with an explosion, but with a quiet, precise action that would leave no room for doubt about its source. I drafted a single, polite email. It was addressed to Sterling Corp's General Counsel, a Mr. Thorne, a man known for his meticulous nature and his quiet, almost imperceptible aversion to corporate drama. I also CC'd the lead partner at the law firm that handled Sterling Corp's external legal affairs. The subject line was innocuous. Inquiry regarding overdue vendor payments. Vendor name. The body was brief and factual. I stated that, based on my understanding of Sterling Corp's internal processes and historical payment cycles, a series of payments to vendor name appeared to be outstanding. I gently suggested that a review of the payment records and the active vendor contract might be prudent, especially considering the potential for service interruption. I then attached a scanned copy of the original contract, a document I had personally secured and digitized years ago during a renegotiation. I didn't explicitly mention the CRM failure or the broader system collapse. I didn't need to. My email, arriving as it did amidst the escalating panic, acted as a subtle confirmation. It suggested that this wasn't a random external breach, but rather an internal operational breakdown with potentially contractual implications. The fact that I, Amelia Vance, the forgotten IT infrastructure manager, was the one providing this crucial information was no accident. It was designed to force the company to confront the vacuum my absence had created. The response was almost immediate. My personal inbox, which had been relatively quiet, lit up with internal notifications. Emails from Thorne's office, a flurry of concerned messages between legal and the interim IT lead, all peppered with phrases like urgent review, potential breach of contract, and immediate escalation. The scent of my deliberate inaction had drawn the sharks. As the day wore on, the internal chatter intensified. I could sense the shift in their collective consciousness. The initial chaos was morphing into a dawning realization. This wasn't a random technical glitch. This was a symptom of a deeper problem, a problem directly tied to the expertise they had systematically ignored and eventually sidelined. They were beginning to understand that the silent architect of their digital world had, in her quiet departure, taken the blueprints with her. The foundations of Sterling Corp's operations were showing cracks, and they were beginning to suspect that I, Amelia Vance, was holding the hammer. The trap was set. The company was in disarray, their operations crippled, their reputation teetering, and they still had no idea the full extent of the leverage I held. The endgame was in sight. The digital silence from Sterling Corp lasted precisely 48 hours. 48 hours of cascading system failures, frantic IT troubleshooting, and a growing sense of dread within the executive ranks. My personal phone, the quiet observer of their unfolding catastrophe, finally rang late on Wednesday afternoon. The caller ID displayed a name I hadn't seen on my personal contacts list in years, but whose voice was instantly recognizable. Arthur Thorne, Sterling Corp's General Counsel. His tone was a stark departure from the imperious pronouncements I'd grown accustomed to from his office. Gone was the confident, slightly condescending legal authority. In its place was a strained politeness, a palpable undercurrent of desperation. "Amelia, Arthur Thorne here. I hope I'm not disturbing you." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my chamomile tea. "Mr. Thorne? No, not at all. Is there something I can help you with?" My voice was perfectly neutral, devoid of any hint of the satisfaction simmering beneath the surface. He cleared his throat. "Amelia, Sterling Corp is experiencing some rather significant operational challenges. Our IT infrastructure is, shall we say, under considerable duress. We've been attempting to address a widespread system failure affecting our CRM and financial forecasting tools. Our current IT team seems to be struggling to gain traction." I let the silence hang for a beat. "I see. That sounds inconvenient." "Inconvenient is a rather mild way of putting it, Amelia. It's bordering on catastrophic. Deals are stalled, client communication is non-existent, and our Q4 projections are in jeopardy. We've received notice from vendor name regarding potential contract termination due to lack of payment confirmation. Frankly, we're in a rather precarious position." He was getting to it. The carefully constructed facade was cracking. "I recall you managed the vendor relations and IT infrastructure for Sterling Corp for quite some time, Amelia," Thorne continued, his voice lowering slightly. "Your institutional knowledge is, shall we say, extensive. I dedicated over a decade of my life to ensuring Sterling Corp's systems ran smoothly." "Mr. Thorne," I replied, my voice still calm but with a subtle undertone of steel, "I ensured every vendor contract was managed, every system update was implemented, and every potential vulnerability was addressed proactively. It was my job. And we didn't adequately recognize that dedication, Amelia. Hindsight, as they say, is 20/20. Nathan is quite distressed. He's attempting to manage the situation from Tokyo, but is proving challenging." Nathan. Stuck in Tokyo, likely facing an enraged board, his reputation in tatters, all because he couldn't remember my name. The irony was delicious. "So, Mr. Thorne," I prompted, "what is it you need from me?" There was a pause, filled with the rustle of papers on his end. "We need your expertise, Amelia. We need your access. We need your help to get things back online. We're prepared to make significant concessions to ensure your cooperation." This was it, the moment of truth. I had two options laid out before me, two paths leading to vastly different outcomes for Sterling Corp and for Nathan Altman. "Mr. Thorne," I began, my voice steady and clear, projecting an authority that had been cultivated over years of quiet competence. "I have no desire to see Sterling Corp fail. I poured my career into building its infrastructure. However, my contributions were consistently overlooked, my name forgotten, and my expertise undervalued. You cannot expect to dismantle the engine and then expect it to run without me." I could hear him swallowing hard. "We understand that, Amelia, and we want to rectify that. We are prepared to offer you a substantial compensation package. Reinstatement to your previous role, of course, with a significant salary increase, a substantial bonus, and full autonomy over the IT department. We are also prepared to offer a generous severance package should you decide this is not a path you wish to pursue further. Option A. A clean slate, a golden parachute, and a tacit acknowledgement of their monumental error. It was tempting. It offered a swift resolution, a return to a semblance of normalcy. But it didn't truly address the core issue, the deep-seated arrogance and disregard for talent that permeated Sterling Corp's leadership. I continued. However, Mr. Thorne, there are other factors at play here, factors that go beyond mere system functionality. The operational failures you're experiencing are compounded by several contractual oversights, clauses I myself insisted upon years ago during periods of significant renegotiation. For example, the vendor contract with vendor name explicitly states that failure to confirm payment status within 72 hours of notification by the vendor can result in immediate contract termination and penalties. Currently, the lack of CRM access has prevented such confirmation. I let that sink in. The vendor was a critical piece of their financial puzzle, and losing them would have far-reaching consequences. Furthermore, I continued, my voice taking on a more decisive edge, my personal records, meticulously kept and independently archived, detail significant contributions to proprietary software development that fall under specific intellectual property clauses within my original employment agreement, clauses that, in the event of termination without cause, allow for the reversion of certain intellectual property rights to the employee. I heard Thorne shift in his seat. The politeness was rapidly evaporating, replaced by a dawning horror. "Amelia, what are you implying?" he asked, his voice tight with suspicion. "I am implying, Mr. Thorne," I said, the finality in my voice leaving no room for misinterpretation, that Sterling Corp is facing two distinct paths forward. Path 1, as you've outlined, is my cooperation, which would involve a swift resolution to the current system failures, reinstatement with significant compensation, and a formal acknowledgement of my contributions. This would mean the vendor name contract remains active and the intellectual property in question remains with Sterling Corp. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. Then I delivered the second option, the nuclear one. Path 2, I said, my voice dropping to a measured, unwavering tone, involves a failure to reach an agreement. Should I not be satisfied with the proposed terms, or should Sterling Corp fail to address these issues promptly and decisively, I will be forced to initiate formal proceedings. This would include, but not be limited to, a formal complaint to the relevant regulatory bodies regarding the breach of vendor contracts, including significant penalties for Sterling Corp, a full audit of Sterling Corp's IP ownership, which, based on my documentation, would likely result in substantial claims against the company for unauthorized use of proprietary technology, and potentially the immediate cessation of all my operational input, which, as you've witnessed, would cripple your business entirely. The press, Mr. Thorne, has a voracious appetite for corporate malfeasance. This would become a very public, very expensive disaster. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Thorne spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Amelia, this is blackmail." "This is accountability, Mr. Thorne," I corrected, my tone firm. "A consequence of years of underestimation. You have a choice. A reasonable resolution or a complete and utter downfall. The decision, as always, rests with Sterling Corp." I await your response by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Good day. I hung up the phone, a profound sense of peace settling over me. The tea had cooled, but the warmth inside me persisted. I hadn't acted out of spite, not entirely. I had acted out of a deep-seated need for recognition, for justice. My decade of invisibility had been a crucible, forging me into someone capable of executing a plan with surgical precision. The next morning, at precisely 8:47 a.m., my personal phone rang. It was Thorne again. His voice, when he spoke, was devoid of its earlier apprehension. It was calm, resigned, and surprisingly professional. Amelia, we've reviewed your terms. The board has unanimously agreed to path 1. A small, genuine smile finally touched my lips. Excellent, Mr. Thorne. I'll require a formal written agreement outlining the exact terms of my reinstatement, including salary, bonus structure, departmental authority, and, importantly, a public acknowledgement of my past contributions and the strategic value I bring. This agreement will need to be reviewed by my own legal counsel before I sign. Of course, Amelia, everything will be provided. And regarding Mr. Altman, Thorne hesitated. He will be resigning his position effective immediately. The board has decided that a change in leadership is necessary to move forward. The news was delivered with a quiet finality. Nathan Altman, the CEO who forgot my name, was out. His reign of arrogance had ended not with a bang, but with a silent, meticulously planned, professionally executed takedown. Within a week, Sterling Corp was back online. The CRM hummed, client communications flowed, and the financial forecasts were restored. The vendor situation was resolved amicably. My name was on every system login, every important document, and the company's internal newsletter featured a prominent article detailing my return and celebrating my invaluable expertise. I returned to Sterling Corp, not as the invisible ghost in the machine, but as its rightful custodian. My office was larger, my budget unlimited, and my authority absolute. The fluorescent lights of Sterling Corp still hummed, but now they illuminated a workspace where my contributions were not just acknowledged, but celebrated. The world, I'd learned, rarely gives you what you deserve. Sometimes you have to meticulously plan, patiently wait, and then, with cold, precise action, take it yourself. My decade of being forgotten had been my preparation. The daylight saving time incident was my signal, and the subsequent operational meltdown, my checkmate, if watching corporate hubris meet its match, and quiet competence triumph over arrogant neglect, stirs something within you, consider hitting that like button and subscribing. It's the silent acknowledgement that sometimes the most satisfying victories are the ones fought with intellect, patience, and a perfectly timed reminder of forgotten details. For Sterling Corp, the price of forgetting my name was steep. For me, it was simply the cost of finally being seen.